So do I have to admit everyone? I think so. Or here I can admit all. That's gonna be annoying. Hey. So as we're admitting everyone here, if you want to keep your video and microphone off, we have a lot of participants, so we just want to make sure we're able to stream it as smoothly as possible.
Okay, no problem.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining. We're just working on getting everyone admitted. Try to keep your video and microphone off for now. We have about 50 participants, so we're just trying to make sure we have a smooth stream here. 17 so far. Yeah, so I'm going to share a file that Chris created. So it basically is the outline for what we're going to be discussing today. And it'll also have a lot more resources and links. So I'm sharing this to our chat. It's downloading now. Hopefully, if you guys check the chat and respond just in our chat here, if you were able to receive that and hopefully download it. So you will have that outline and you'll be able to access the links there and some more detailed information that you can reference even after we're done with the workshop here. So that is now uploaded in the chat. So if anyone, if you can see that, please respond and let us know. Oh, there we go. Okay. Oh, awesome. Thank you, Casti, for letting us know. So yeah, hopefully, yeah, we'll keep that document there. Definitely download that. It has lots of detailed information, everything we're talking about today, plus some more, and some links that we'll reference on different topics that if you want more resources there, you'll be able to find them.
If it doesn't show up on yours, if you just put your email in the chat, I will email it to you later. Oh, yeah, but I want to know this.
Okay, yeah. Gotcha. So yeah, this should be recorded. So if you are registered, you should be able to access the recording later as well. This is our first time trying to host a workshop on Zoom, so please be forgiving of any glitches. We're still figuring it out. Okay, so we have someone saying it did not show up for them.
It might not show up for people using phones.
Yeah, it might be if you're using your phone versus your computer as well. It is, I mean, it's not a huge document, but that might be part of it. Okay,
Hey, Ray.
got it. Someone said they got it, but they had to click a couple times. Right.
Hey, Rach, this is Mom.
Hi.
I'm not seeing it either, and I'm on my phone. So
Yeah, okay. So it might be the phone thing. So yeah, we're still having everyone join. Do try to turn off, yeah, your sound and your video. Looking good. So yeah, it does seem to be the phone thing. So maybe later if you're able to log in on your computer, you'll be able to download that document there. It should stay here in the chat. And we're gonna try to get it posted on our website too. We think it's a really great resource. We want you guys to be able to have access to that. So. All right. No, do you think we should just get started? It's still, what time is it? 1:05.
Yeah.
Okay, so someone on a computer and still can't see it. Interesting. So yeah, like I said, if you're able to see it, go ahead and try to download that. You can follow along, see those links, and we will try to make sure we can get that document to everyone, hopefully posted somewhere on our website, emailed out. We'll keep working on that. Yeah, so the document is at the very beginning of this chat. So if you're just now joining, go ahead and scroll up all the way to the top, and that's where the document should be posted. We haven't had anyone new join for a minute, so maybe we should just get started.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining us here for our very first virtual workshop and just regular workshop of the season. We're really excited about this. We are both really passionate about growing food, and we're both really excited to share that knowledge that we have. So this is definitely something that, you know, anyone can learn and anyone can do. So we are here to give you, the top knowledge and the tools and the resources so that you can go out and start growing food. So today we're going to be covering quite a bit, but now that we're starting here in April, I mean, this is really the time to go, get your hands in the dirt. This is the time to get started. So we're going to try to give you all of that basic information just about how to get started, selecting a spot. How do you turn your grass into a bed? If you have a bed from last year, what's the best, tilling practices? We'll go over the basics of, seed starting or sowing seeds directly, irrigation. And also we really wanted to dive into soil health because that's really critical to having a healthy garden and having vegetables that are actually full of, all the nutrients that you want them to have. So that's something that we both feel very strongly about, and it can be really overwhelming. So we wanted to kind of break that down for you. What do people mean when they talk about soil health? How do you know the state of your soil, or what can you do to fix it? So we're actually going to go really in depth on all those topics as well. And that document has lots of extra resources about it. So yeah, thank you for joining us. Should also introduce ourselves. So we're both the co-managers here of the farm at Growing Places Indy. I am Rachel.
I am Chris.
And we're both fairly new in our roles here. But yeah, we're really excited about this. We're excited for you joining us. We have kind of broken up the workshop into different segments. So like I said, we're trying to keep everyone muted and videos off for now. We do have a lot of participants, so we just want to keep that streaming smoothly. But at the end of each segment, we'll kind of open it up for questions. And if you just want to put those in the chat, I will kind of filter those and we'll try to get those answered at the end of each section. So yeah, I think we will go ahead and get started. So I'll pretty much hand it off to Chris here.
Okay. So when you're starting a garden, the best thing to do for your plants is to provide it with the optimal growing conditions. That's going to be light, water, and a nice healthy soil. So you want to choose a spot in your yard that you're going to have the best sunlight. And you can figure this out by spending a day just mapping out the shadows. Try to aim for full sun or as close as you can get. And I should mention, I'm referring to a vegetable garden. Some other plants need shade, but most vegetable gardens are going to want full sun. And you're also going to want to make sure you have easy access to water. Bed options. So raised beds and container gardens are a really great way to start from scratch. You just have a paved surface, your space is really limited, and container gardens in particular are really great if you're not yet fully committed to the idea of gardening. You can just grow a few plants in a container and practice that way. Raised beds in particular are way easier to maintenance than having a bed on the ground. There's going to be less weeds, less rodents getting in there. You're going to have a quicker start to the season, good drainage, very little erosion, but you need to keep in mind that with that extra warmth and the extra drainage, you got to watch out for drought stress in your plants. And I'll talk about that a little bit further in the irrigation. And when you're picking out a container size, decide what plants you want to grow first, and then look up what size of a container you need. That's very important. You've got to give those roots enough room to grow. You're going to want to fill those containers or raised beds with topsoil, compost, other organic material like manure, or you can just buy a pre-mixed potting soil. Now, if we're going to talk about turning a lawn into a garden, this is a bit more work. And you always want to call before you dig. I provided a link in the PDF for that. If you're in an urban area, you're going to want to be a little cautious about heavy metals. There's a lot of lead in urban yards, so I also added a link in there to figure out how to get your soil tested for contaminants such as that. As far as testing your soil for nutrients, you need to specifically go to an agricultural lab. We went to Agri-Labs out of Auburn, Indiana. I have their link in there for you too. And this is important to know because you want to know what kind of nutrients are already in the ground. If you start amending your soil with not knowing what's in there, say your soil already has a bunch of calcium and you add more calcium, you could cause a toxicity to your plants, which is not good. And once those nutrients are in there, you can't get them back out. Sending it off to a lab though is relatively inexpensive. Ours was just $20. And they're way more accurate than those kits you're gonna buy at the store. And it'll give you a lot more information on those kits as well. So I'm gonna briefly go over what information you're gonna get out of these tests, but I went into more detail in the PDF that you can search through later. So on their website, you're going to send them a message saying you would like to do a soil test, and they will email you back with instructions of what to do. It's pretty simple. I won't really go over that because you'll get that. But I do want to go over a few of the things that might be confusing when you get your soil test back. They're going to tell you what your cationic exchange capacity is. Now that means it's a measurement of the surface area in your soil. I know that sounds complicated, but it basically is just measuring the nutrients in your soil available for the plants. And the next thing would be your base saturations. And that is a measurement of how easily those plants can take up the nutrients. And those both relate basically to how much organic matter is in your beds. The more organic matter, the better. And the more organic matter you have in there, the higher your cationic exchange capacity will be. So then it's going to tell you your soil pH. You don't want your soil to be too acidy or too alkaline because this is going to hinder the nutrient uptake of your plants. Ideally, you want it to be 6 to 7, 7.5. It'll tell you your buffer pH next. That is only important if you have acidic soils because that buffer pH number is going to help you generate and figure out how much lime you need to add. And I added links in there for you so you can get that all figured out if you need to add lime to your soil. Around here, that's not really necessary because our parent material in our soil is limestone. So all of the soil around here kind of tends to be more alkaline than it is acidic. It's going to tell you all of your macronutrients. Those are your big nutrients that your plants need a lot of. Potassium, calcium, sulfur, magnesium, nitrogen, phosphorus. It's going to tell you whether you have high or low, medium values. And it's gonna give you recommendations of how to fix that. But the most important thing it will tell you, in my opinion, is how much organic matter you have. And like I said earlier, that is directly related to your cationic exchange capacity. Those two go hand in hand. And I want to show you a little example. You can, I don't know how well you can see on the video, but you can kind of visually see how much organic matter is in your soil. It'll be a lot darker, like this one here. This is soil that I just got out of my yard. I am turning my lawn into a garden. So you can see there's like hardly any organic matter in this soil versus our soil here has a ton of organic matter and it's much, much darker. So that's a good just visual way to test that. Where am I? Next, it will tell you your micronutrients. And this your plant only needs a small amount of. And once you have all of this information, now you know what you need to amend. I provided in the PDF a list of really great amendments. You're just gonna wanna be cautious that some amendments do multiple things. For example, through my test, I found out that my soil was really lacking potassium. So I first thought maybe I'll add some wood ash because that has a lot of potassium. But it also raises the pH, and the pH of my soil was 7.5, so I don't want to raise it any higher. So I had to find another amendment to use. So I decided to go with green sand. But just have to do a little bit of research when you're trying to figure this out. And you can email me and ask me questions. I'm okay with that also. Okay. As far as amending micronutrients in your soil, I personally wouldn't add any specific micronutrients to my soil. I would just add, and I'm gonna keep saying it over and over again, organic matter. If you are constantly adding organic matter to your beds, your micronutrients will eventually level out. Things like grass clippings, leaves, plant trimmings, your table scraps, they already contain various amounts of micronutrients, and that'll be the best way to let those build back up over time. So now I'm going to tell you about my 2 favorite ways to turn a lawn into a garden. First would be sheet mulching. Sheet mulching, you need to give yourself plan in the future for this because it's basically composting in place. It takes about 6 months until your bed will be ready to plant in. What you do is you cut your grass short, you moisten, and then you loosen the soil, and we're going to demonstrate that for you in a little bit. And that's when you add your amendments, whatever your soil is lacking, you want to put in there. And then you start the layering process. You want to layer organic matter, manure, newspaper. Some people put cardboard in theirs. I personally wouldn't, but you can do research on different recipes, so to say, and figure out what works best for you based on what you have on hand. And then, yeah, 6 months later, you're gonna prep it and it should be ready to go. The next step, or the next way to turn a lawn into a garden, which is what I did in my yard this year, just recently. I put pictures in the PDF for you so you can kind of see how that was done. Also, I have links for both of these. And that's double digging. So double digging, you're gonna wanna first map out the area that you wanna use. You wanna divide that into sections, remove the grass. We'll start one section at a time. Remove the grass from that section. I'm gonna dig a trench about 10 inches deep. Place all the soil that you're taking out and put it off to the side in a bucket or a wheelbarrow because you're going to be putting that soil back in a little bit. But the point of doing this, you're getting a lot of soil out, and then you're going to loosen that subsoil. So that way you're really getting a lot of air deep down in the ground. That's the purpose. That's why it's called the double dig. And again, we're going to demonstrate that for you a little bit later, how to loosen soil and aerate the soil. So after you do that, you're going to start piling that soil back in, but mixing in organic matter while you do that. Because if you're turning a lawn into a garden, there's probably not really any organic matter in there. Most lawns have about a couple inches of topsoil, which is the soil that has the organic matter. So you want to mix it in there pretty deep, and that's when you're going to want to add your amendments as well. And then by the time you're done re-adding the soil you took out and all of the organic matter, you're going to have a mound a little higher off the ground than what you started with, which is great because that's going to also help with drainage. And then you just repeat that process section by section until the bed's completed. I did mine like one day at a time because I was pretty busy this week here at work. So you can do that too, or you could do the whole thing at once. It's up to you. All right. So whether you are going to choose a raised bed or you're going to turn your lawn into a garden, it's going to be up to you the dimensions you choose to pick. And you just want to make sure that you're choosing what is comfortable for you to access and to get around. And usually no wider than 4 feet, I would say, for most people. But then if that's too much for you, go smaller, make it comfortable for you. And most importantly, don't go overboard. If this is your first garden, you want to keep it small, keep it simple. If you do too much at once, you're going to overwhelm yourself and it might get a little out of hand and you're going to get stressed out and just sort of give up on it. Pick out a few plants that your family loves to eat and start there. And in the meantime, you could start lasagna mulching a different area for a future garden bed as you're feeling more confident. And that's the end of the first section. Is there anything you want to add, Rachel?
Yeah, not really anything to add, but just to come in and kind of like reiterate some of the points. So yeah, organic matter is the big thing that you're looking for in your soil. She showed the demonstration of like kind of what that actually looks like. And also if you get that $20 soil test, that's going to give you a lot of great information about what's in your soil. And yeah, organic matter is the big part. And you can get that through the composting in place like she talked about, but also just composting in general. And that's definitely going to be a future workshop that we talk more about composting and kind of the do's and don'ts of that and some tips there. And yeah, I think the dimensions is also really important, 4 feet wide. You don't want to go much bigger than that because that's about how far you can easily reach from each side, about 2 feet. So yeah, if you go wider than that, it's going to be hard to get to that middle. It's going to make weeding difficult. And yeah, you can do smaller, different areas. You can do one long one and just work with the space you have. And think about, yeah, what you can reach in, what feels manageable right now. If you're intimidated, it's fine to start small because then you're going to be able to be much more intensive about that small area and make sure that you're able to kind of pay attention and take care of it and keep up on it. Whereas if you start really big, like she said, it can get very overwhelming. And then if things go wrong, that can be really discouraging. So it's good to start small, kind of build your confidence. And like she said, start doing the lasagna gardening or mulching in a different area. And then that soil is already prepped for the next season. So that's that section. So if you have any questions, go ahead and start sending those in. We'll give you a minute or so here. So how do you add organic matter to the garden? And is soil testing needed if I'm using pre-mixed potting soil?
Are you doing that in a raised bed or are you mixing that into the ground?
3 raised beds.
No, you don't need a soil test.
Yeah.
Are
Yeah, so
those-
if you're building up the soil from the ground, like those roots aren't really going to be going into like your actual soil. They're just going to be expanding into that raised bed and the soil you've added. So it's only if those roots are going to be penetrating down into your natural ground level that you would want to know what's in that soil, especially as far as contaminants. Maybe not so much for amendments, but that would be more the contaminant side. Should I take out current soil since I don't know what was in there? So does that mean that you mixed in like your current soil with the potting soil within the raised bed?
where you have already raised beds in your yard that have soil in them that you just don't know where they came from?
Yeah.
Would you recommend a liner for the raised bed? I would recommend a liner if you do have that nervousness about you're in an urban area and there might be lead in the ground and you don't want your roots tapping into that, then a liner would be good.
And then also, I mean, that's going to be depending on what plants you're doing. I mean, some plants have pretty extensive root systems, so you're going to want to think about how high your raised bed needs to come so that the roots do have plenty of room to extend down without going through that liner.
Yeah.
All right, awesome questions. Do we have any more questions right now before we move on? Oh yeah, we had the question about mixing the soil. Should I take out current soil since I don't know what's in there?
I would not worry about it. I mean, I'm assuming the soil in there was probably purchased like a potting mix, most likely. So I would say it's safe. I would just be worried about, like we said earlier, urban areas that
Like natural soil that's
there's been a lot of constructions or roads close by, that sort of thing, where like lead would be leaching into the soil. But I think your raised beds that already exist are probably safe.
Yeah, and then recommendation for brand. Is that brand for
Potting
like potting soil? Yeah.
No, I don't have a recommendation.
necessarily,
Personally, I would just pick whatever's cheapest. I wouldn't worry about it too much, and then I would just focus on like adding compost and building up a nice healthy soil as you go. Okay, if you don't want to buy pre-mixed potting soil, you're gonna want to find bags of compost that you can buy, or your own compost. Some topsoil would be good. You can even add things like coconut coir. That's a really great medium to use and mix in there. Do you have any other things you can think of?
Not specifically, yeah, for home gardens.
Yeah,
I mean,
mostly
we
just
ordered our compost, so we do our own composting on site, but we also like adding, again, making sure we have a lot of organic matter in our soil. So we order compost every few years just to kind of top our beds and get some of those nutrients back in. And we get that from Green Cycle, which is a local company here in Indianapolis. And that's in all kinds of different quantities. So depending on how big of an area you're doing, that might be more economical than trying to buy like bags of soil to fill your raised bed.
how many inches to
Top your beds.
with compost? Oh, how many inches do you top your beds with compost?
So for ours, like if our beds were already pretty established, we really just did like a couple inches on
Yeah.
the top. Some of our beds, we built up a little more just because there was more erosion in that area. So we also were using it just to really build up the beds. But you don't need, tons of compost mixed in to get that organic matter in your soil. And the other practices we're going to be talking about with taking care of your beds, like I said, we're really promoting like proper soil health and like really taking care of your soil and building it. So if you're following these recommendations, your soil is going to keep getting healthier and healthier, and it won't have those same needs to be mixing in so much compost.
Well,
Or like,
sort of.
yeah.
Like, you got to think of your soil, it is an organism on its own. There's like entire ecosystems of bacteria and fungi, and we're going to talk about that a little later, but you need to feed that and you feed that with your organic matter. So in my opinion, you can't really go wrong with adding more and more compost.
Yeah. But there's different ways to do it
There are
sometimes rather
different-
than buying potting mix or buying bagged compost. Yes, we are definitely looking forward to doing that lesson as well. Are there any specific nutrients that you should have for tomatoes? Do you have that off like the top of your head? The most?
Not off the top of my head, but if you get that soil test, it will ask you like what you want to grow, and then you could put like tomatoes, and they will give you
Yeah, they'll give you.
suggestions. Or you could just Google it.
I have heard of rock phosphate right in the bottom of planting holes for tomatoes.
I haven't.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. So yeah, that's definitely stuff you can look into. I mean, there are a lot of resources out there about specific plants and their needs.
And in that PDF, like I said before, I listed like a ton of different kinds of amendments and
Mhm.
what you would use them for. So that's a good resource to start you off. And with that, you also want, if you're going to amend your soil, make sure you're looking up the amounts needed based on the size of your bed, which I think I missed to say that earlier, but that is important.
All right. So yeah, if you have more questions, maybe just save them until we get to the end of this next section. And what is the next section?
Irrigation.
Irrigation. So here we go on irrigation.
All right. So to know how your soil is going to hold water and how it's going to hold its nutrients, you need to know a little bit about soil texture. So this section, I guess, is more for if you're turning your lawn into a garden, because if you're adding or if you're buying potting mix for your raised bed, you're going to have a good soil texture. But this is more for creating the soil texture that you want, or structure. Anyways. So texture is referring to the particle size of your soil. Sand is a large particle size. It drains water really fast and it does not hold on to nutrients very well. Silt is somewhere in the medium size, and it feels really floury. I guess I forgot to mention sand. If you touch your soil and if it's really sandy, it will be gritty. And then clay is negatively charged. So that means it's going to hold on to those cationic nutrients I mentioned earlier. So clay is pretty important. You want to have a good amount of clay in your soil because it's going to hold on to nutrients. And you the downside to clay is that it can get compacted really easy, which is what a lot of soils around here are like. It's a lot of clay, and like your lawns are really compacted most of the time. And it can get waterlogged pretty easily too. So that's something to watch out for. It feels sticky. Loam is a mixture of those textures, and that is what you want. That's ideal. Like my soil from my lawn that I turned into a garden was a mixture of sand and clay, but you can do your own test. I provided a link on how to do that. There's like a ribbon test, and it's just touching your soil, feeling it, and just different little experiments you can do to tell you what texture your soil is. So then you'll have a starting point of how your soil is going to react to water. And then structure is the next part. And that's how those soil particles stick together or aggregate together. And that's important because you want them to aggregate together so that way there's a lot more pore space, and that means there's more air in your soil, water's getting down in there better, and it's giving more room for the roots to grow around. So again, organic matter. Organic matter is really important in creating those aggregates. They go hand in hand. Sorry, I'm just gotta catch up on where I left off in my notes. Yeah, the organic matter acts as a glue to bind the particles together. So ideally, you want your soil to be easy to penetrate yet resistive to the erosive forces of wind and water. And you want it to be able to hold and drain water like a sponge. And that's how you'll know that you have a good texture and you have good structure, is if your soil is acting almost like a sponge, in a way where you get a sponge wet, it's going to drain out the excess, but it's still going to hold on to what it needs. And your soil should act the same way if it's in the condition that it should be in. And when you touch it, when it's a little wet, it will almost feel like a sponge. It'll be sort of spongy. That means there's a lot of air in there, and there's a lot of moisture, and there's a lot of aggregates in there. So it's ideal to keep your soil nice and moist for your plants. You don't want to underwater them because you're going to cause drought stress and dehydrate them, and that's not good. They'll die. But you also don't want to overwater them because your plants can get waterlogged and they won't have any oxygen, and they'll die from that as well. And whether your plants are going to drain quickly or if they're going to hold on to that water too much is going to be, again, determined by that particle size I mentioned earlier. So that's why it's good to know. And if you have really clay soils and you have really sandy soils, getting to the right structure you want, again, organic matter. So it's better to water earlier in the day, because if you water late in the evening, that moisture is going to stay on the foliage of your plants. I can't say it. On the leaves of your plant. And that's going to make them a little bit more susceptible to fungus, especially things like cucumbers or zucchini. Those plants are really susceptible to getting that downy mildew, and that's not good. So keep those plants dry. The above ground part, keep them wet with their roots. So, and then you also don't want to water on a hot sunny day anytime after noon, because the light, if there's little beads of water on the leaves, that light is going to scorch the plant. Your raised beds are going to dry out faster, like I mentioned before. So if you're setting up drip lines or soaker hoses, you want to keep those towards the edge of your beds, and that's going to help prevent that from drying out, because the center is going to be a bit more stable as far as that's concerned. If your option is sprinklers, I would only use that for your leafy greens. They can withstand that moisture a little bit better. But if you've got things like I've mentioned before, cucumbers, tomatoes, most any plant that vines, you want to keep them dry. So for those, you would want to do a drip line, a soaker hose, or even just a hose with a handheld attachment where you're just watering at the base. So drip lines, they're more expensive, but in the long run, you're going to waste less water, which if you're using water, that you can automate those a little bit better. They're just a little bit more precise. Spend the money to begin with, it's just going to be a lot less stress in the future. We can talk about that later. We can show you how drip lines work in a future workshop if that's something. And then the last thing and the most important thing to do to keep your soil nice and moist is to mulch the top of it. I am not a fan of bare soil. I know looking out here you just see soil. That's something that I want to work on as I work here. I say you either plant really densely to keep that soil covered, or you mulch the top of your beds. That's going to keep the water in. It's also going to keep weeds out. And then it's eventually going to just get broken down by all of our microbe friends that I'm going to talk about in a minute. And then that that mulch or those leaves or whatever you put on top is just going to turn into nutrients for your plants later on. And that's irrigation.
Yeah.
You want
I think
to
that one's
highlight?
pretty straightforward, yeah.
Yeah.
But if you guys have questions, let's go ahead and get those. Also, yeah, I know it's kind of like a lot of information right now, but with it being virtual, we're trying to kind of get the information out there, and we're going to do more demoing here towards the end of the workshop where we're actually showing you like the tilling and some more of like the watering methods and some other of the topics that we'll get to. So yeah, we will be demonstrating more, but any questions on irrigation so far? Nope, maybe not. Yeah, irrigation is pretty straightforward. And that's definitely something that we can talk about more later in the season and in future workshops. We are just trying to kind of give you the basics right now, but we're going to have workshops throughout the season, throughout spring and summer and fall. So we will be providing more information, more in depth about these topics so that as you have your plants already in the ground, you know, we'll be with you talking more about the maintenance, the watering, the pruning, things like that will all be coming. Here we have a question. How many days of the week for hand watering? So I think you go more like by feel.
Yeah,
And
more
Yeah,
feel.
it depends on your soil structure as well, how fast it's draining. Like she said, it's kind of good to keep like that spongy almost consistency. So you don't want it to be just like saturated and water like pooling and sitting there because again, your plants can drown. Those roots need oxygen in the soil as well. But you don't want it to be completely drying out and getting powdery. And another way to test kind of how your soil is holding water, especially on a sunny day like this, the very surface of your soil could look pretty dry and powdery, but sometimes if you just kind of like stick a finger down into it, you will feel that like just below that surface, it is still holding some moisture. So it's really, I go by feel.
Yeah, go by
with,
feel.
when
The
it needs to be watered.
temperature of what if
Mhm.
it's a really hot day.
Yeah. And again, because you
it's gonna
want to
dry out
water
faster.
in the morning if possible. So your soil could feel not super dry, but not waterlogged. And if you know it's going to be a sunny day, then maybe you should go ahead and hit the soil with some water. Do we have another question there? All right, good. I'm glad that makes sense. It's kind of hard to explain virtually some things with farming, but yeah, doing the best we can. All right, so any other questions about watering right now? And if not, we will move on to our next topic. Or we're demonstrating now, right? Because we're getting to tilling.
We'll
Okay.
demonstrate at the end of the
Okay.
topic.
Okay. All right. So now, yeah, we'll get into tilling.
All right. To understand whether tilling or sorry, how should I word this? Before you understand the impact tilling has, whether that's good or bad, you need to understand a little bit about soil life. So there are bacteria, fungi, nematodes, worms, other bugs, all living in your soil, which is great. You want them there. They are recycling those nutrients. They're taking all that organic matter I keep wanting you to add in, and they're eating it, and they're making those nutrients available to your plants. And then bacteria and fungus in particular, and when I say fungus, I'm going to start saying mycelium. Mycelium is fungus. It's roots. They have networks of roots called hyphae or hyphae. I'm not sure how you pronounce it, but those are really important because they will funnel nutrients from one area that has excess all the way over to where your plant is and give it to them directly in exchange for sugars. They've created and evolved this system. That's how they work together. Those little webs also help hold together those aggregates I mentioned earlier. So very important. You want to make sure that you're not killing them when you till. So bad tilling practices will degrade the soil structure, will break up those aggregates, which you don't want to do. That's going to lead to poor water retention. It's going to kill the mycelium, and then it's also going to supercharge the other microbes like the bacteria, and they're going to start, it's going to supercharge them with oxygen when you're like tilling and inverting the soil. So then they're going to want to consume all the nutrients, and they're going to consume them and waste them. So that's why tilling tilling with like a rototiller that inverts the soil and flips it around is not good. You do not want to do that. If you're very first starting a bed, maybe do that just to loosen the soil and start adding organic matter. That might be a good way to prep in the beginning, but you don't want to keep doing that. And this is also why herbicides and pesticides are terrible. Keep them away, keep them far, far away from your garden, because they're gonna kill that soil life. They're gonna hinder the nutrient uptake in your plants, and they're gonna make you have to rely on synthetic fertilizers. And there's so many issues with that that I won't go into, but yes, so no pesticides, no herbicides, keep them away. And your goal is to grow topsoil. You're not just growing plants, you want to grow soil too. Nice, healthy, nutritious soil. So in the beginning, when your soil is compacted, you need to loosen it. You need to let in that air. You need to let those microbes and those fungus get down in there and start doing their thing. And you need to get oxygen in there for them, because they need oxygen as well. So you got to aerate it. But the need to do this should lessen in time as your soil is growing. I said what that does. So there's a lot of confusion around farms claiming to be no-till. So some people might think that we don't interact with the soil at all. We do. We're just using good tilling management. We're only tilling when we need to till, and our end goal is to not till. If you're gonna wanna start a true no-till garden, the only way to do that is very extensive cover crop rotations. And I'm not gonna explain that to you. It's a whole thing that I'm still learning about, but
Maybe by the fall. We can start
yeah.
talking about that.
I will do a class on rotations, but not really for the same purpose. Anyways, so now we'll start demonstrating for you.
Okay.
So when this
Make sure we can see the bed. There we go. Okay.
So when you first are trying to figure out whether or not to till, you want to know if your soil is compacted. And to do that, you're just going to take, this is a spade fork, by the way, and you can just see how easy it is for you to push it down in there. And that's about how far we got until it becomes like it's compacted. We can go ahead and demonstrate what to do. And she's using a broad fork right now.
Yeah, it has these really long tines that are sinking down into the soil. And like she said, we make the distinction between like getting air down in the soil versus flipping.
Yeah.
So this allows the soil layers and the structure to stay in place because we're just going straight down. But then as we pull these handles back, you can see it's breaking the surface of the soil. So it's making some cracks, it's letting air down in there, but we're not flipping it and completely disrupting that structure. So broad forks are a great tool. I mean, this is what we do with pretty much all of our beds in the spring, but something more accessible to a lot of home gardeners is something like this spade fork that she just showed you, or even just like a pitchfork, and you can get the same effect. So if you sink that down in your soil as deep as you can, and then just kind of pull it back, you can get that same cracking. You're getting down in that soil, opening it up a bit, but we're not flipping it, we're not churning it up too much. We're just trying to get some air down in there, break it up a little bit while keeping those layers and structures in place. And so you would just go through your whole area. So if you just did like the double dig method or something like that, you're not really gonna need to do this because you've already gone down. Well, I guess once you first dig.
Yeah.
This is what you would do at the very base before you add the soil back in. But then once you've added soil back in, that's already pretty loose and turned up. So that's pretty much ready to plant.
Yes.
But
This is for more of like next year.
Yeah. So once the bed is sat through the winter, it's going to get a little compacted again. So this is good just to get some air back in your soil.
So that is the first reason why you would till. The second reason why you would till is, again, once your bed's already there, talking about next year, you want to add some more organic matter because it's good to do that every season. And the reason, or this till is a more shallower till. You're just getting the top 1 to 5 inches, and you're just really doing it to mix in if you're adding any amendments or you're adding more organic matter. And we typically use a stirrup hoe to do that with ours. You can demonstrate.
So yeah, this just has kind of this metal loop on the end, and we're just using that to kind of go through and just mix up those top couple inches. So the tines from like the broad fork or the pitchfork, they're going much deeper. There's already those cracks kind of under the surface. And this is just going up to break up that surface a little bit more and make a nicer like planting medium for your seeds or your transplants when you put those in. So again, this may not be a tool that a lot of people have at home, but really just anything. I mean, a lot of people,
There's all different kinds of
things like
tools
this.
out there, yeah.
It's really just anything that's going to mix in that surface level soil, that first inch or so, and just create, yeah, like a nice planting surface for yourself. And also for mixing in any amendments. So if you already have a bed from previous years, that's also what you would, when you would want to put in your amendments, and then use a tool like this or like the stirrup hoe to mix those in so it's really evenly spread throughout the bed, not just like poured in certain areas.
Okay, that's the end of that section. So if you have any questions.
Questions there? Looks like yes. Okay. Okay, so our first question looks like, is it okay to use the tillers once a year in the spring?
Yeah, or like we'll probably do it multiple times because we're doing multiple plantings. I would say just do it before you plant. Check if you're compacted, loosen the soil if you need to, mix in amendments, and then you're ready to put the plants in there.
And then we also have excited to learn strictly no-till with intense cover cropping rotation. Sources for learning this in the area.
None, and I wish there were. I am learning it on my own, and maybe someday we'll get to like offering those more advanced classes. I would be happy to do that in the future. But in the meantime, there's books and resources. You just have to kind of research on your own at this point. What is that tool called for level off till?
Well, we can just go back through. I'm not sure which one you're asking about, but the big one here is the broad fork, is this one. So it has the big metal bar with pretty long tines and long wooden handles. We have the spade fork here, which is very similar to a pitchfork. This is a stirrup hoe. So it has kind of that stirrup looking metal loop that's cutting through the soil. And then we have, I don't know, so if that's what you're asking about, I'm sorry, I don't know. But I mean, you see them in lots of like home gardening stores and things. So we thought we'd show it as an option.
Okay, the next question is a really great question. So at the end of the season, when your plants are done producing, do you pull them out with their roots, or do you cut it really low and leave the roots in there? Definitely cut as low as you can at the base of the plant and leave those roots in there, because they're just going to decompose, and that nutrient that's left is just going to go back in there and be available for future plants. It also is going to leave that air space that you want, and yeah, there's no reason to pull out the roots.
So for mixing in amendments each year, when you don't want to overtill, are you just mixing in the top few inches each year?
Yes, when you're mixing things in just the top few inches,
Yeah.
but you want to make sure you mix it pretty good. So don't
Yeah.
just put it on there and think that's good enough. You do need to mix it in.
Sources in the area for buying good quality tools. Not Home Depot. I'm not sure, honestly. We have all of our tools have been here for a while. We don't really buy many new tools. Yeah, maybe, yeah, if any of you here watching know of some good local spots, yeah, go ahead and share those. I haven't really had to buy new tools since being here, so yeah, if you guys have any recommendations for that, yeah, please share to the chat there so everyone can see those. So any more questions right now for tilling? Anything else? All right, guess we can
Okay.
move on.
Seed starting. Okay. So I'm gonna go over the difference first real quick. Direct sown, that means you are, sorry, I need to tilt this up real quick. That means you're directly seeding your plants out in the garden bed outside. Transplanting is when you start seeds inside or they're started in a greenhouse and you take that baby plant and then you put it in your garden later. So that's the difference between those two. Some people didn't know that, but okay. So as far as direct sowing goes, now is the time to get started. So in April, you can be starting things like lettuce, so arugula, spinach, beets, radish, carrots, the list goes on. But ideally, it will be seeds that can germinate in cooler weather. So that's something like you have an idea of what plant you want to grow. You're just going to have to look up the recommendations, or the seed packet will tell you what it germinates in. Once the temperatures hit that and they stay level, then that plant is safe to be planted outside. These plants that we're starting now in April typically mature faster and they don't like the heat very much. They're good spring plants, they're good fall crops. So seeds you can start here in a month when the temperatures are staying warmer would be more like tomatoes, cucumbers, zucchini, melon, squash, your peppers, your eggplants, most any plant that would vine. Those seeds need constant warmth to germinate, and they typically don't mind the heat, and they mature a little slower. Spacing. So spacing your plants, you're gonna want to follow the directions on the seed packet, but I will explain something else that might be confusing at first. But so when you're planting plants that are in the same family or they're the same plant, you want to follow those instructions and give them enough room that they need, because they are taking up the same amount of root space and above ground space, and they're also taking in the same nutrients. Now, when you get into companion planting, which we'll have a workshop on in the future, then you can start planting things really close together, because they're not taking up the same root space, they're not taking up the same space above ground, and typically they're not competing for the same nutrients. So things like tomato and basil, you can plant really close together. And things like cucumbers and radish, you can plant really close together. But you don't want to plant your cucumber and your cucumber next to each other. That's not going to work. They're going to compete with each other and they're not going to survive very well. And then as for transplanting is starting seeds indoors, like I said before, and people just do this to get a head start on the season. So next month, when the temperatures are warm, you could either be starting your tomatoes, or you could buy some tomatoes that have already been started and then put them in your garden, and they're just going to start producing for you faster than as if you waited to seed them outside. It's a little too late to start seeds indoors right now. but it is the perfect time to start buying your transplants. We have a plant sale happening at the moment, and we're gonna have our summer plant sale here soon. So check that out. And then you always wanna, I guess I didn't say, for seeding, you wanna water the soil right after you seed. For transplanting, you wanna water the soil before or right at the base. Try not to get water on the plant that you just transplanted. And now we can do some demonstrations for that.
Righty. So for some direct seeding, just kind of wanted to show an example of that. So I was going to show you with just a couple cucumber here. So now that this bed has, already been prepped right here, we've done the deeper tilling with the broad fork to break it up lower down. We've mixed in the surface level. And with cucumbers, most beds, our beds are about 3.5 feet. So we really only do one row of cucumbers. And the seeds just blew away. It's okay. We only do one row down the middle. So again, that's just based on the spacing, the trellises that we put in. We want to make sure they have plenty of light coming in. We don't want to block light because they are going to go vertical. So we have this handy tool, but you can also just use like the handle of like a shovel or any other tool just to kind of create a furrow, just a little trench down the middle of your bed.
You can use a hoe for this too. I mean,
Yeah, that's true.
What that is.
And then, so for our cucumbers, we do those like fairly close, and then you can thin them. Again, ours are mostly going vertical. So you're just dropping those in every few inches. And then you can go through again with that same tool, or if you're not in a big area, I mean, it's really easy just to go through with your hand, cover them back up. And like Chris said, then any seeds that you're putting directly in the ground like that, you want to water in right away to kind of jumpstart that germination process. And then as far as transplanting, which as you said, we have lots of plants for sale currently. So this is one of the plants that is currently on our website. We have lots of kale starts for you guys, and that's actually what we just planted a bunch of outside. So it is the perfect time to put these guys in the ground. So this is our curly kale variety. And when you take it out, you want to make sure you get that whole block of soil, because as you can see, the roots have already really extended into that whole block. We want to keep as much of that root system as possible so we're not traumatizing the plant, so that it can really adjust well to the soil you're putting it in. So this is pretty easy. You can use a small shovel. Now that you've already loosened up your soil, it's pretty easy just to dig in with your hand. And on a lot of transplants, you kind of want to bury them more than maybe you would originally think. So if you can see on this little kale here, so he has a pretty long, kind of what we call a neck, this beginning stem before those first two leaves came out. And those first two leaves are going to drop off anyway. So you really want to bury all the way up to that first real growth point on your plant. So you don't want to bury, obviously, where new leaves are coming out, but you want to bury it all the way up to that point, because if you just bury it down here at the soil block, you kind of have a floppy plant. It's going to be falling all over the place. So to give it that stability, you want to make sure you really have it low down. Bring in some soil around it. So we have it all the way up to that growth point, and just kind of compress. We call it tucking it in. Tuck that in. And then, yeah, if you don't have a drip line or something like that, and even if you might be using a sprinkler in the future for your greens like this, when you've just transplanted them, again, you don't really want to be spraying water right down on them. Also think about like kind of time of day. So same thing with watering is with transplanting. You don't really want to transplant and put your more fragile starts in the ground, like in the heat of the day. It's already kind of a stressful situation for them being put into the ground. So it's better to do that in the morning or the evening when they don't have the harsh sun coming down on them, or just doing it on a cooler day or a cloudy day. And so once you have them in the ground, then you just, again, want to water them in, but just keep it right there at the soil. And that'll help them be able to establish and get ready. And then once they've gotten bigger, again, kale and your other greens that we have available right now, like collards and Swiss chard, they're a little more hardy. You can use a sprinkler and kind of top watering system with those later in the season. Anything else to add there, Chris?
For that, could
Let's
put
bring it
my
back up.
email on there. So if any of you didn't get the PDF, I'll type my email in the chat and I will email it to you. If you just shoot me a quick email and let me know you didn't get it, I will send it to you. And you can also ask me some questions that you think of later.
Mm-hmm. So as far as plants in the ground and frost advisories, so a lot of like your greens are really pretty frost tolerant, especially the cooking greens. Like they're pretty hardy plants. Things like lettuce heads and things that are a little more tender, those it would be better to cover if you do have a night that it looks like there's going to be some frost.
And you can buy frost cloths. Ours are called Agribon, but you can buy a cloth to put over those to protect them if you're still in that frost danger zone time.
Yeah. And so for cucumber, no, we are not actually seeding our cucumber right now. It is a little early for that. That's one thing that we will be direct seeding soon. We just wanted to show you, but no, not quite the time to direct seed cucumber. And we will also have cucumber plants in our summer plant sale by May. When you add mulch, when would you add mulch if planting starter plants?
And I would put the mulch on first, and then if you're transplanting, you can just kind of move some away, put that plant in there. Even with seeding, like you can still have a mulched bed. I mulched my beds, and I just took a hoe. I scraped off the area that the mulch was where I wanted to seed. I seeded them, and then I left that spot kind of bare. I didn't put the mulch back in because your seeds will have a hard time getting up through that. So how she showed you on the bed where she made that furrow, I did the same thing, but I just scraped the mulch off first.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Do you have to be careful when watering when you're directly sowing outside? Will the water move the seed around and have an impact on germination?
If you're dealing with really delicate seeds and you're not planting them very deep, and then you pour like a heavy water on them, yes, that will happen.
Yeah.
So you just kind of need to be gentle with seeds like that. Like our cucumber seeds, they would have been fine.
Yeah.
But either way, I would use kind of more of like a shower.
Yeah,
sort of
like a shower setting. That should be fine. I mean, when we direct seed like our cucumbers and our radish, the seeder we use for that isn't really burying them. The seed is honestly just kind of like laying on the surface, and we're able to just spray that in with like a shower attachment on a hose or a sprinkler just fine, and they don't wash away. And it's too late to start seeding even for summer veggies. I'd say summer veggies, I mean, you could still start them. Probably most greenhouses and growers like ourselves like have already started our pepper plants, tomato plants, eggplant, all of those. They're just a little slower to germinate and get going. They're also fruiting plants. I mean, that just takes longer for them to produce what you're going to harvest.
And like I mentioned before, like starting them indoors is really to get a head start on the season. We're getting really close to the point where those plants can just be seeded outdoors in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
So,
but I mean, yeah, if that's something you're wanting to just experiment with getting that system kind of ready for next year, and you could start even earlier, I'd still recommend, you try that. You can absolutely still start them. What type of mulch? So you use like a wood mulch.
I use wood chip. You can use leaves.
It's fine. yeah, you could use leaves as well, but that may depend on, yeah, the wind in your area. Good source for quality seeds in the area. So that's a little hard right now. So many places are closed. Again, if some of you know, absolutely throw that in the chat. We order all of our seeds from Johnny's, which is like a nationwide company, but they're really great for people growing in larger quantities. But I know, yeah, there's a lot of great resources for smaller growers. But with everything going on, a lot of the
Yeah.
websites we did check are currently impacted by the pandemic and aren't shipping orders right now. So kind of a rough time for that. Urban farmer for seeds in the area. Okay, thank you, Linda. Why is spinach so hard to germinate? Tricks for that.
I've
Yeah.
heard spinach is hard. Actually, my teacher in our greenhouse, hated spinach because he couldn't get it to grow. I've personally not had any issues.
Yeah, I
I
haven't
don't
either.
really know.
I don't know. Anyone else had issues with spinach but been able to work through them maybe? If there's something that you learned from that? Yeah, I haven't really had much issue with that either. It might be temperature. I mean, they do like cooler
They like
temperature to germinate.
So yeah, maybe
So if you're starting them too late in the season, it might just be
Too
too
hot.
warm.
Yeah.
The soil's already too warm. Sweet potato slips. They do grow here well,
yes.
but
I grew mine in I bought potato bags last year.
yeah.
And I grew mine in potato bags, and
Yeah.
that worked really well.
And I'm currently growing my own slips at home, which are probably going to be a little late, but I'm trying it. So yeah, I'm not sure where you would buy them.
You could. I mean, right now, trying to buy.
Yeah, where did you get your slips
I bought
past years?
mine at a nursery.
Okay, so yeah, maybe
So
a local
greenhouse.
nursery greenhouse would have potato slips. That's not something we grow here at growing places. So yeah, we don't have those starts, unfortunately. Any other questions?
What nurseries
Why
do you
can't
like
you
here?
transplant carrots? I think just like root vegetables in general are pretty hard to transplant.
They just
Like,
don't like it.
Yeah, they don't want to be moved. They want to
Yeah.
germinate and then start, going down into the soil. So transplanting their root, I mean, yeah, the root is what you're harvesting it for. So same thing with radish and beets and other,
Turnips.
root vegetables. They just are better to direct sow. And because they are so cold hardy, I mean, you can put those in the ground really early. I mean, our first round of carrots went in several weeks ago. I can't remember the date, but those can go in early. So yeah, like we said, right now, I mean, carrots, radish, beets, those are all things that we have seeded recently and are doing some more rounds of here in the next week. So those are definitely easy things to do at home.
Do people grow cantaloupe here? Yes, they like the heat. Start those, and once the temperatures reach 60, 70 and don't drop back down.
Yeah.
I don't usually see transplant. I'm trying to get the seeds to sprout, but I don't know.
Have you grown cantaloupe from transplants or just from seed?
Transplant. I've done.
Transplants.
Yeah. Could start those inside.
Yeah, that's something I personally haven't grown, so don't have an answer there. Any other questions? You want to go ahead and put in your email? So yeah.
What's good to seed now? Okay, but direct seed more. I just feel like it's harder to watch and control, but I'll give it a try.
Timing with direct seed is big. A lot of plants, like especially carrots, I know people have had a hard time germinating carrots, and it's really about keeping the bed pretty moist. At least this, again, you don't want to saturate your soil, but at least keeping the surface of your soil nice and moist is really good for getting carrot seed to germinate. And for once they're really little, to get them going. So right now, again, your roots, so carrots, radish, turnips, beets, those are all things that you could seed right now. And those are pretty easy to hand seed as well. Just kind of look at the spacing and try to get close. Once you see what your germination is like, you can do some thinning if you need to. But a lot of this you really learn by doing, and especially when you're at home, like just start trying stuff and you'll kind of learn some trial and error. And like we said, it depends on your soil a bit and how much sun you're getting in the area that you're planting. And then also, your greens are also things you can direct seed right now. So probably getting kind of towards the end of spinach, it's going to start to get a little warm for spinach, but you could definitely direct sow spinach, arugula, lettuce, any green really.
Let's go up to, there was one we missed. Like, when do you add trellis or cages? So if you're growing a plant like cucumbers or tomatoes that need cages or a trellis, you want to get those set up right before, once they're a few inches high. Once they get to the point where they can't support themselves anymore and they need that support is when you want to have that support there for
and
them.
That's something we'll do more workshops on later in the season that kind of goes along more with maintenance, especially for very vining plants like cucumbers and tomatoes. That's definitely something we'll have more of a workshop on to show you our trellising methods and our pruning methods for those plants.
Okay, so when do we need to have seeds sown for carrots, radish, etc.? I would start now and do it for the next couple of weeks. Those can still grow in the summer too.
Yeah.
I mean, you could seed those really whenever, but you just got to keep in mind, like carrots in particular, there's varieties that will mature fast and there's varieties that take a long time. So if you want to get the timing right, just do your research a bit on what you're growing.
Any tips for growing broccoli?
For me, I like to grow my broccoli in cooler weather. I know you can grow it in hot weather, but I tend to have more problems with it like bolting too fast before I get out there and harvest it. And that cooler weather is going to slow it down a bit. But you need to transplant it if you do that.
Okay. So question about the cover. I guess we could just go show that. I mean, we have time. So what we have currently on our beds here, the brand is called Agribon. And like you just said, it basically is, go ahead. It basically is like a sheet. I mean, if you had a sheet, I think that would be fine. It's really just kind of, a blanket to insulate. We have these metal hoops to keep the Agribon off of the actual plants. So it's really insulating the bed. Which, we have to weigh ours down, and today's a windy day, but
it'll just make tunnel.
It's like a tent. It kind of tunnels, creates a tent, and then just the heat that the soil holds throughout the day, the heat from the plants themselves, all of that, it's just kind of insulating them,
trapped in
protect
there,
them from frost. And then we have a different kind of cover that's basically looks like a black net. And we use the same hoop system and drape that over, and that is for sun protection. So that's something we'll definitely be using because we're hoping to keep this whole area here. This is currently our spinach, arugula, and lettuce mixes, and we are hoping to try to grow those through the summer. And like we said, they don't really like the heat, so we will definitely be using some shade cloth to try to give them some protection, keep them a little cooler.
With plants that don't like the heat, the issue with them is that they tend to want to bolt fast, which means they go to flower and then they die. So
they're trying to get to the end of their life cycle. Basically, they're trying to create the flower, create the seeds to start a new generation. So for plants that you're harvesting and you want the fruit, that's not what you want. Sweeter carrots. I don't know. So we grow a couple different varieties. I'm not sure necessarily certain ones that are sweeter. I can say that for Carrots, they get sweeter once they've gone through a freeze, but that's more for the fall. So if you plant some later season carrots and they're already really established, but then once you have like a freeze come through, like one of your, some not really heavy ones, but some light freezes in late fall, that actually causes the plant to concentrate more sugars to the root. So that's how you can get some really good sweet carrots.
Recommendations to keep pests and animals out of your beds. Well, there's a lot of recommendations, and I'm gonna do a whole class on pests and disease and how to prevent that. But if you're looking to like keep, say, rabbits out, marigolds are a good one. They don't like the smell of marigolds, so those are good to plant around your garden. Whatever you're comfortable
Yeah,
with.
whatever you want. So for donations, we did want to make this really accessible. Also, it was our first time trying this virtual thing, so thank you for being patient with us. Hope it went pretty well on your end. But yeah, we would also love donations. So if you go to our website and the support tab, there's a place to donate. It'll take you there.
Tell them a little
So-
bit about all the great things we do and what their money is going for.
Yeah, so our Any Winter Farmers Market that we organize is typically November through the end of April, and we had to close that 7 weeks early. And so that was quite a hit for our vendors when that's their main way to sell produce to the public through the winter. It's a hit for us because we're the ones, organizing it. So yeah, definitely your donations are really helpful at this time. We're still trying to get our produce going to sell to the public here. But yeah, your donations go to support all of that. Go to supporting our Snap Match program, being able to open up the market again in November and support those vendors. We have the plant sale going on right now. So like we said, if there's stuff that you're wanting to get in the ground now that might be a little late to direct seed, we have our kales and our herbs. We have those available right now on our website that you can order. And then by May, we will have some different varieties of tomatoes, cucumbers, zucchini, peppers, all of those fruiting plants. We will definitely have those starts. So yeah, you can definitely support us that way as well. We really appreciate it. We're doing all of that contactless, so you can order it there online, select a pickup for you. We're going to be working on setting up a similar system for our produce. So once we do have produce that we're able to harvest, we're hoping to get an online shop set up for that so that you can keep ordering from us that way and supporting us in local.
All right, there is my email. If you didn't get that PDF, you email me. I will email you the PDF. Also, if you have questions you think of later, I will happily answer them.
Yeah. And yeah, this whole thing should be recorded. So if you are registered and watching it, you should have access to this later. Growing strawberries.
What was it?
Recommendations on growing strawberries.
Strawberries are fun. They you want to buy starts for those. I've never grown strawberry from seed. I always get starts, and then they just sort of spread. So pick a spot that you're okay with just having a strawberry patch, plant them, and they might not do so great the first couple of years, but they're a perennial. They'll just get better with time, and then they'll, like I said, spread.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks so much, guys, for joining us. Yeah, feel free to donate, please. We would definitely appreciate that through our website under the support tab. Also, yeah, watch out for our plant sale. The summer plants are coming soon. We're going to get our produce uploaded soon so that you can order. We'll have, spinach and lettuce mix and radish. All of those things will be kind of the first that we can start harvesting along with some herbs. So yeah, just stay tuned, stay involved. Thank you so much for supporting us this way. And we will be organizing some more workshops for you. So hopefully this was a good place to get you started, answer some of those basic questions, and we will definitely be providing more information throughout the season to keep you going, keep supporting you in your home gardens. And yeah, we're always happy to answer questions. So email there, you can send us questions through social media. We're also going to be trying to post a little more on social media to kind of give you updates or tips on what we're doing. So I think that's all.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, guys.
Thanks.
Have a great day.